Hi guys, welcome to episode 2 of It's Not You, It's Me. Today we are going to be talking to Sister Nadia. She is a matchmaker within the Muslim community, and I think it's really important that we begin to have conversations with Muslims in our community that are dealing with our daily issues. There's a lot of topics that I get come through in my DMs, especially on TikTok, and I am not the most professional in every single aspect, but in this case, I think having Nadia on with her experience with matchmaking allows us to, well, me to ask her some questions for you guys. And if any questions come up during this that you wish to ask her, comment below and I will touch base with her and she can answer more of your questions, inshallah ta'ala. So, Nadia, how are you? Assalamu alaikum, sis.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum, sis. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing well, thank you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, so I am a matchmaker, which isn't the normal traditional sense. When people think matchmaker, they think anti-G service, they think, I don't know what they think, but they don't generally picture us and who myself and my team are. Um, I've been doing it for a long time, alhamdulillah. So it's been about 10 years roughly. It's not something I chose. It was kind of just kind of happened. So my mum started out doing that anti-G thing a long time ago when I was very young, and she decided to develop it into a business, which she did. And then it's only when I kind of joined we kind of excelled it a little bit more and tailored it a little bit more, and alhamdulillah it's grown quite a bit. So yeah.
Alhamdulillah. For how long have you been involved in the matchmaking scene?
So I was probably involved in it a little bit before. So it's probably been about 13, 14 years for me, but officially every single day for 10 years.
Wow, subhanallah. Okay, so it's fair to say that your experience is vast enough for you to be able
Wallah,
to
yeah.
sort of analyze the
Hopefully.
scene as such. Yeah. Okay, so how do you find the Muslim matchmaking scene right now? Like, just give me a little bit of an overview of how you're finding it's going.
I think it's very messy and it's very difficult for people to know what is the right way to go about things because we went from such a stark change of our elders' way of doing things, and all of a sudden the new generation being born here decided we don't want to do things like that. We want to do things differently, but there was no template. There was no okay, if you don't want to do things this way, do it that way. So it just kind of came like however and whenever you'll be able to meet someone and you just take it as it comes, but there was no structure. Like even when it comes to people communicating with someone, there's no structure. They don't actually know how to do. So they think just being sociable is enough, but it's not, unfortunately. There's a lot that comes down to it. So I'd say it's very messy. And when a lot of people come to me, and because we provide a structure, they just think, well, and using their own words, they say, alhamdulillah, I've never had a structure before. Like I've never known what would be the next best step. I've always just guessed and just gone with what opportunities I have.
SubhanAllah, that actually is so predominant in our South Asian culture. Like when you said about previous generations, it was very much about, do we like the sound of him? Is
Yeah,
the family getting on okay? Is there enough money? Just do it.
yeah,
There really wasn't many other parameters to go by. And
yes,
now we've entered this generation where the parameters are through the roof now. The
yeah.
list of requirements is insanity. And whereas I do agree with the advancement we've had in this scene, I don't agree with the level of sort of Western mindset infiltration we've had in the Muslim matchmaking scene.
Very
We're
much.
trying to mix them together and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
don't go together.
No, they don't. They can't because I feel like along the way, and no, I'm not speaking for any of my clients at all, but I feel like along the way we've kind of lost sight of what's important and what actually makes a relationship continue and what pushes it forward. And again, it's I don't actually think it's anyone's fault. I think by people believing that they have a high criteria list, they think they're doing better because they're narrowing it down. But my mindset is I don't believe that's narrowing it down. That's closing you off to so many opportunities because you've narrowed it down of people that could be real potentials, but you've assumed otherwise. And it's because people look at their friends, they look at their family members, they look, oh, this person settled down in this way. So either they factor that in and they say, oh yeah, this is what I have to do, or they cross it off and they say, no, that person's gone through that. So for example, like I have clients who will say to me that um that one of their family members has gotten divorced. And because of that reason, they will not meet a divorcee or they will not, something like that. They've used that example and they've brought it into their scenario, which again increases their criteria list. So yeah, it's quite high right now.
Yeah, we've got a lot of fear in our community. I think when we've seen our previous generations have these essentially loveless marriages
Yeah.
that were pure duty.
Yeah.
Um, and now they're coming and they're like, no, I want that romance. I want that Bollywood. I want that, that Hollywood. And you are right. Even I went through that phase where I was like, oh, no, I wouldn't want someone that is divorced, or I wouldn't want someone that has a child, because you're attaching your own fear-based, your experiences, you've gone fear-based approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
100%.
even I have loads of friends who are single parents and they're fantastic people, but the fear that other people have and a projection on their lifestyle, oh my God, it's like, no, 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 run away. And you're right, we're missing out on so many potential good relationships because we're leading with our fear and our concerns.
Yeah.
And then we've still got the family to keep happy. They
Yeah.
still want to have a say. They still want to vet the family. They still want to do all this and that. So I feel like maybe this is the generation where we find that balance between both things.
I hope so. I really hope so because it is so difficult. And like when it comes to people and criteria, I think one of the main things that people I think maybe take criteria side of it, and I think people are very emotional and very feelings based. So they base it, it's not so much logical anymore. Well, I don't know if it ever truly was logical, but it's not so much a logical choice because it's very much led by emotions. And I get that marriage is, of course you want to have feelings and emotions towards your spouse, but I am very much of the mindset of you can't establish that in one meeting or two meetings when you speak to them or when you see them. It's just very difficult. And in fact, I do a lot of research, and the percentage of people that actually get that spark factor is very low in the entire world. Like it's extremely low and it doesn't happen. But this is what drives people is, but I didn't get that spark, but it's like, what is that spark when you come to think of it? It's attraction. And when people choose the wanting the spark over anything else, there's a lack of substance. So I often find that when a couple has a spark first time round, they won't last as long because they've reached their peak of being able to find a connection so early on that it was all attraction and no substance. So it doesn't progress. And that comes with a spark. Like people think, no, if there's a spark there, surely it will progress. But that doesn't mean you will progress to marriage. It just means there was initial attraction both ways. Whereas when you have substance, along with, yes, I think if as long as someone's presentable, as long as you can tell they put their best foot forward, they're not scruffy or anything, but there is substance, then that has the potential to grow. And those people in my environment move much faster and much quicker with ease to progressing because the substance is there and they've grown to kind of get to like each other because the foundations were there. It's like maybe it wasn't an amazing like bad example but of like a house, if the house wasn't all bells and whistles initially, but you know what, had the foundations to be a really good one, but you took time to build that together, you worked on it and it became something amazing. I think people need to and think they're scared of investing the time. That's what it is as well.
Mm. Okay, let's explore that a little bit more about this spark thing.
Mm.
I was reading a study quite a few months ago now, and it actually said that that initial rush that you get, which is the butterflies when you meet someone, is actually very much based in anxiety. And we mix the feelings of excitement and anxiety and lust, and they all become in this one big bubbling cauldron. And because of the type of media that we are exposed to nowadays, where it's literally she's walking down the street, he's clocked her and fallen in love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our reality is very much based on if there isn't a bomb explosion in both of our hearts in that initial meeting, that this isn't real.
Yeah.
And this is what I was mentioning earlier about the Western concepts were versus the Islamic concepts in approaching for marriage. Because
Hmm.
how you approach it is very much Islamic based. This isn't about us running off into romantic style, movie scene and there's tunes playing and we're just running off into the distance. This is about when real life hits, when
Hmm.
pregnancy comes, when financial struggles come, when one of your parents passes
100%.
away, all of these things, you're looking for a solid partnership in life. And we do have a strong desire for romance. So, would you say that if there wasn't an initial spark and fire to start with, people shouldn't be scared of that, which is what I'm getting from what you're saying? Actually, somebody who's more stable and you don't get all those butterflies and anxiety to start with, probably have a more stable foundation for you to discuss practical life matters with.
Yeah, I think that there's a tendency, both in male and female, to chase someone that's not as interested in you as you are in them. It's a very, very common thing where if someone's giving you driplets of, attention, you're chasing that more than the person that's sitting there ready to say, I'm serious, I'm here, I'm financially stable, I'm here to get to know you. So that's the thing I say to my clients all the time is what you will always meet is somebody that is financially stable, they have a good career, they have a level of dean, whichever level it is, fluctuates from person to person, but there's an element there. They're here, they're serious, they're committed. All those hard things are already done. What's left is for you to just see if there's some sort of personality rapport that you can build and does it progress from there. So I think you have to look at, are the important factors met, because I've experienced it where some people have thrown all of their criteria out of the window because they're attracted to the person, like they've decided, but this is the most important thing. And you mentioned about like romance. I honestly do believe that is important because that is what that's also a big foundation, as we see from the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ was very, affectionate with his wives, and I honestly think this is something that should be taken into consideration. Like I don't think a marriage can thrive essentially without having that affectionate part to it. But I also believe that it just doesn't happen initially. But I'm not for anyone forcing themselves. So I always say if you get to a stage where you've invested a few meetings, you've gotten to know them in different environments, situations, and it has not grown for you, even a little bit, then it's fair for you to say, you know what, I've given it a chance, I've tried, and I can't force an emotion because it's not also fair on the other person for you to force it from your end because if you don't think it's going to last at this point, then you don't want them to invest any more time. But there's that fine balance of wasting time. People always say, oh no, I don't want to meet again because I don't want to waste their time. It's not wasting anyone's time. You're both here to commit to someone. You're both here to learn how you can progress. So it's not never a waste of time. What is a waste of time is spending 6 months speaking to someone, you haven't met their parents, and you're just kind of still on surface level conversation, you haven't progressed much further, and then you both decide not to move further. That is a waste of time. But it's never a waste of time just to see could something grow or couldn't something grow.
So, would you say then, in that case, the importance of feeling lust is something a human being, basically nowadays, from your experience, is what they're searching for? They want that big boom clash.
Can I be honest? Now this is a personal opinion, it's not my professional one. I think that lust before marriage, religiously speaking. Now, when it comes to my service, I have a very balanced approach between realistic and religious because I don't mean religion isn't realistic, but I also mean follow the sunnah, but at the same time, you have to also look at where you're at in life and, and adjust. And I have a very realistic approach to marriage, but um what was your question again? Sorry.
say that basically people are like chasing this lust.
Oh, yes, that was it. So when
Yeah.
it comes to religion, I honestly believe that where does relationships before marriage come from? It comes from a lust kind of push. And where does that come from? I feel like a push to come out of the what Islam says is comes from shaitan, right? And I know I never actually bring that up. I never talk to my clients about that. Not that they ever come to me with that issue mainly, but now that we're on the topic, is the urge to feel it. Well, shaitan firstly doesn't want you to settle down and have a halal relationship, right? And I don't really take him into consideration much when I'm making these decisions, which is strange. Um, but yeah, he doesn't want you to. So where does that urge come from all the time? And this Western society that we live in, TV, movies, everything is based on lust. Everything pushes lust even more. You can't even flick on Instagram and see ads without it being sexualized. So I think it comes from that where the society is now built around that, which has trickled into our way of thinking. And we think, no, but I'm not majorly attracted or I don't feel this crazy pull towards someone. And I honestly think, yeah, when you invest the time, it does come with time. I've saw it thousands of times. I saw it. I've experienced it with people where they've said, you know what, I do want to marry this person. They've invested the time, but it happens very rarely to people from the offset.
Yeah. I think I would come to just gathering my own experiences and the things sort of I've been through and steps I've taken in my life. When I was younger, it was a big priority for me to feel this whirlwind. If I did not feel this whirlwind, I didn't believe it was true and I didn't believe it was real.
Mm,
And slowly as time goes on and you get to your 30s and you kind of there's a different kind of mindset and a different approach and a calmness that starts descending over you. And you start realizing that actually it's almost like you're chasing a figment of your imagination. And human beings, we've got a really like insane ability to fantasize.
mhm.
Like, even the other day, like non-marriage related, me and my friend were talking. We were reading this article where Quincy Jones has left 71 million each to
Yeah.
his children. And we just started sitting down and chatting and go, what would you do if you got 71 million? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I would do this, this, this. And we, for a good couple of hours, we went into La La Land.
Yeah.
We were planning, nobody's got 71 million coming their way at all whatsoever, no time soon. But we were all like, we would do this and that and then do this. And our imagination has an amazing ability to go way beyond reality. And when it comes to romance, especially when it comes to women, our imagination then starts controlling what's happening in real life.
Yeah.
Our desires start overshadowing the reality of what's happening around us. And this is where we miss out predominant factors. We sort of start becoming deaf to the blatantly red flag sentences that have been said to us because we want to feel lost in this goodness. Because
Mm,
life is difficult and our nafs is constantly playing on us. Like, oh, this is fun. This is good. Go for that. Just have this. Don't worry about it. Life's short. YOLO. And then you're like, oh my God, and you're spiraling. And then the content that we consume, I think that's a really important factor that you mentioned before. The content we consume influences us to such an extent that, especially as Muslims, we've been given the advice, we've been given the instructions. If you have even the tiniest little indication that, okay, I need to slow down what I'm consuming. And guys, that includes music, TV shows, especially as women, we need to understand the frame of mind we're in, depending on what side of the cycle we're on and how far we're taking those fantasies, because those fantasies are leading us to endless disappointments.
it's so sad. It's really sad because people will be on this cycle for years, then they will crash. And because they'll realize, unfortunately, people base it upon age, right? So they'll say they'll get to a certain age and they'll just crash and they'll think, why haven't I found someone? What's wrong with me? What's happened? Why has the people that I like hasn't pursued me back, or why hasn't the situations that I've wanted not progressed? So I think it is definitely about where you focus your mind and what your priorities are. And yeah, it's very easy. I think everyone is guilty of getting carried away sometimes and not realizing what should be done rather than what you want to happen. And but this is the thing, no one is saying to these specific people that you can't have an amazing spouse. You can't have a spouse that you're attracted to. You can't have a spouse where there's romance and emotion and, all that stuff. Of course you can, but you first have to center yourself, as you said, and understand what are the priorities involved. And then you will shift and your search will take you on a different path, meeting different people that probably wouldn't have ever considered before, but they've led you to the right person. So yeah, it's definitely how you view your search, how you view other people, how you view marriage, and definitely center yourself into reality of, well, I want to get married, I want to meet someone good. Let's focus on that part first,
Mm.
before I think of feelings. How can you think of feelings so early on? I think it's too much pressure for you as for that person. It's so much pressure to put on you and that other person, to say, right, we've just met, so now we should have all of this. It's doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, I like what you said about priorities because if I look at me in my 20s to me now, my priorities have changed drastically.
Mm.
I think when you're young, you have, well, actually, no, forget the age thing. I'm gonna lean towards more of the Dean side. When Dean is your priority, you just approach marriage differently. When it's not a priority and the feelings of lust and desire and romance are the ones that are the overarching motivations for you to look for someone, then you're just coming at it at a completely different angle.
100%, 100%. And I think, so when women speak about women's rights and they talk about this Western kind of way of treating a woman is the right way. But it's like, who came up with the right way to treat a woman is Islam. It literally comes from Islam. Like, I was speaking to someone the other day and we were chatting quite in depth about it, where we assume that, oh, if this person is overly religious, somewhere deep down there's a fear of, but I won't get my rights because they feel like it's going to be taken to an extreme. That's the thing. A lot of people think if someone says it, so in my opinion, right, if someone prays 5 times, that's just the basic, right? This is just my newly formed way of thinking. I wasn't always this way, where that's just the basic, right? You can be sinning, everyone sins, you can be doing whatever you're doing, but praying is the basic. But some people assume that praying means, wow, they must be very religious. But it's actually, in fact, no, they're just doing the basic thing of what Allah has asked us to do. So when it comes to that and when it comes to religion, it is very important you're aligned with your partner on where you both are at. But I feel if followed correctly, that's the main point, is if religion is followed correctly and not used into an advantage, which I think people fear, women fear that men use religion as an advantage. But if followed correctly, it actually gives women's rights an abundance. You shouldn't need to fear. You shouldn't need to worry that your rights are not having been met. But there is a mismatch right now because so many people practice differently and so many people are on different wavelengths that they don't know what's right and or what they're going into, like what to be expected. So they go to this Western kind of view of women and think, well, no, women have this right. If women, I'll give you an example, right? If a woman is working full time and the husband is working full time, but there's a big emphasis now on, well, I'm not doing the housework and myself. He should be doing that and he should be doing this. But then I also think we're mixing up roles here slightly. And I'm not saying a woman's role is to clean the house, but a woman's natural inclination is to build a home, and that's not a man's. A man's built to provide. So in this day and age, of course, couples are both working, but it's a foundation of once he knows that, right, you're gonna be assuming your role where you're the nurturer, you're the carer, you know, in the sense of that you bring that warmth to life, then I honestly think people with the right mindset, men will naturally, so you both, it's like when someone's down, the other person it brings up. And when the other person is down, the other person brings it up. You're never just like this. No couple is both working, both just doing everything the same task because it's not natural to men and women. So I think for a man to appreciate that a woman is also working and you help her when she's down, I think that's what pushes marriage forward. And when a man is down, the woman appreciates, right, let me jump in, let me help him. You're not assuming each other's roles, you're helping each other to bring that level of marriage up. But I think right now is such a blurred line and people get worried and get afraid and say, well, I'm working, and I'm providing, so can't she help me out? Or I'm working, I'm providing, can't he help me out? But it's a case of you have to find that balance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Um, let's just focus now on the fear-based element about getting your rights and not getting your rights,
Hmm.
because that's something that quite predominantly comes up in my coaching scene and on my social media. I think there's a lot of fear-based elements there, especially if we're going to go down the cultural route, because culture has overshadowed our deen
Hmm.
massively. And we put all these cultural, like all these denominations on top that you can't do this, you can't do that, this is their role, this is their role. But actually, even Islam allows for the flexibility in these roles according to your situation.
100%, yeah.
We're supposed to be flexible as human beings. And because we're trying to fit everything in a neat and tidy box so we can feel safe and secure, but as soon as things go outside of that box, I'd be like, that's not what you said. That's not what you promised me. When actually, that's what you're looking for when you're looking for a spouse. You're looking for someone you can go into uncertain terrain with and know that they're going to have their faculties in order to get through that difficult time. This isn't about finding someone who's absolutely just perfect for you. And even the way you breathe in and out, they know everything about you. That type of love, that type of connection in a marriage, I believe it takes decades. It takes a long time to build that type of muhabbat, that type of love that people are looking for to happen in the first initial, split second. So I think the culture needs to be sort of cleaned away and tidied up so we can understand exactly what marriage is because we saw our previous generations not really receiving any love. And that's put us off because we're like, I don't want to live in a loveless, miserable situation that everyone's telling me I must remain in for the
Mm.
sanity and sake of, the rest of our generation. That Islam does not put that level of pressure on
No.
human beings, you know, and then we go on to the cultural element of their opinion on dating. Now, if we're
Mm.
going to use the Western word dating, you're
Yeah.
naturally going to have connotations attached to it that you're like, no, no, we're not allowed to do that. No, you should meet. You should be discussing with the person you're about to tie the rest of your life with and,
Yes.
and hope for success. So these fears can easily be tackled if we just stop contradicting ourselves between culture and deen.
I agree. I think that's really important. It's very mixed and people confuse the two. So um they think that the horror stories that they hear when people move into in-laws or when they have in-laws and stuff is a blanket approach to everything. Like that's just how it is. And it's not. It's not how it is. That's not how everyone is. But unfortunately, there are a lot of cases where it is. And yeah, it's a lot of mixing of culture and religion, unfortunately. And I also think the people that are in really good situations with in-laws don't share it because they keep it to themselves because it's precious. You know, I think the people who are online or, you know, just in general in life are more likely to share if they're not going through a good time. But I think the ones who are genuinely content don't share it. They keep themselves to themselves. And I think that's also something to be aware of as well. Not everyone goes through, you know, those tricky times.
Mm. Okay, so let's expand on this with something you said earlier. about emotional regulation. Now, this is a big topic for me because I think the lack of emotional regulation is what is leading us to more and more failed relationships.
Yeah.
Our expectations are through the roof, and our ability to emotionally decipher when and where a reaction is required, or to be able to iron out our thoughts maturely, is something we're hugely missing. And we sort of put that down to, oh, well, as I get older, I'll calm down. Like we'll just brush it off till later. When
Mm.
actually, no matter who you marry, let's just put it in a fantasy situation for people who are listening. You find a guy that is drop dead gorgeous to you. You've got a connection. You both want to get married. You're like, wow, this is a movie.
Mm.
That does not mean you won't need the skill of emotional regulation to move on in your situation. You probably need more emotional regulation because of how intense your feelings are.
Yes.
You are going to come across in-laws, cousins, aunties, uncles, and a very common thing I hear is, well, I'm not marrying the family. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Newsflash, he's marrying your family and vice versa. And that management and regulation of that requires you to be in an emotionally stabilized place because somebody is going to say something, a situation's going to occur. You
Mm.
cannot just fly off the handle because you thought what you had was a film full of romance. It doesn't bypass the difficulties of life.
Yeah.
So, what would you say about emotional regulation? And is that something we need to work on as a community?
I think so, definitely. I think it also comes from your surrounding environment. So, friends, family members, their opinions also become yours, I feel like. I think it's important for individuals to think specifically about themselves, take into consideration what others say, but ultimately make your own choices and decisions because that's not against Islam. That's not a bad thing at all. I think you appreciate what other people want, but you have to look at what you want, and then you'll be able to understand the type of person that you want to meet, and then it will be a lot more balanced approach emotionally. But when you have pressures and when you have expectations and when you have so many different opinions, like you said, I think that's where the emotional imbalance starts from because you don't know what you want and you're just trying to satisfy something that you don't know what you're trying to satisfy. It's a case of you're just meeting people blindly based on paper criteria to see, well, everything there matches, or he looks good or she looks good from the outside, and let's just see where it could go. And when you don't, when you realize they're not for you or it doesn't work out, again, more frustrations build and more things get added to that list. And that's where it forms. I think meeting the journey you're on when you're trying to meet your spouse is so intense, and it can be spread out through years, 10 years, 20 years for some people, unfortunately. And because all the intensities build up, that will affect your marriage massively. Because if it's not resolved, if you're not going through this, reevaluating as you go and understanding and processing, if you're just going, on a journey without rest or reflection, it will build to that, and you will have lots of things where small minor things in your marriage will seem like huge things because
Mm,
emotionally you're not regulated, as you've said.
yeah, because I think we need to, the way we see marriage is a problem to start with.
Mm.
Because the fantasy, the words that I hear, and I was like this in the past as well, like he should be my everything, and another human being cannot physically and emotionally be your everything. It's
No.
impossible for them to do that. You need to have a circle of your own, a life of your own, a mental and emotional stability that you've created over time and you continue to work on. And
Mm.
that's what really struck me, what you just said about wants. Now, our list of wants now, before in the previous generation, wants weren't even considered, especially for the woman. Who cares what you want? Your job is to get married and reproduce and shut up. And then eventually, when you die, we'll clap you on your way out and say, "Well done, that you put up with so much." Now we've got, well, no, they never had anything they wanted. I have a list a mile long of things that I want.
Mm.
Now, I don't know if you resonate with this or not, but one thing I realized, especially throughout my first marriage, and in hindsight, I can look at it now and say, if you want to be married, you need to be in a place of giving. You cannot have
That's so true.
a wants and desires list. I must have this, I must have this, I must have this. The first thing I get back when people say, well, if I'm just in a giving space, then how am I going to know what I'm going to get? Well, that's where your emotional regulation comes in because you are able to decipher. Your level of discernment increases when your emotional stability increases. So you'll be able to see this is what I'm willing to give time, attention, the whole soulmate element of things where you're there for them and you support them, etc., etc. But in order for me to give these things, I need to make sure that I feel respected. I need to see that this person is also in a giving space. We don't say, oh, well, I'm going to give everything, and regardless of the person who's there, I'll give it to them anyway. That's
Mm.
the balance we need to start striking. So if you are thinking, I need to get married now, and you're not in a place where you're saying, I want to give to someone, and you're only in a receiving mindset, I don't think it's a good idea for people thinking that way to pursue a partner.
Yeah. I think the environment has to be created for it. And initially in marriage, there's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of things that come up that I think there's a blurred line between what people class as a red flag and what a hurdle is because people are quick to assume, no, this isn't right, this is toxic. And I'm saying people because both men and women. Um, but in fact, there's a lot of issues in marriage that pop up initially because you're bringing two people who are essentially strangers together and saying, right, live together, do life together. And it will be tricky, it's not easy for either person. So when there's misunderstandings, and even communication is important, but you have to build communication. You can't just open up to a stranger. And I say stranger because yeah, you'll know them for months and months, but you don't know them. You've not been living with them,
Mm.
so you have to create the communication culture. There's just so much foundation that has to be built. And this is when you're in the talking stage before marriage, you have to see bits of that foundation beginning to be built because it doesn't just happen from day dot. Like it doesn't just happen as soon as you know God's done, right, we start now. There has to be some form of understanding and some form of foundation like in the process of being built to show this is who I am now, but this is who we aim to be later on. So you allow some space for error. You allow space for that person is also learning just like I am. And I totally agree within a receipt in a giving um mindset because there will be times when you believe that you're in the right, truly, but when you relinquish that whatever's in you to say, no, I'm 100% right, you'll notice most likely it will go very well. And there'll be times when on the opposite side, say if it's a man, and he believes, no, you know what, no, I'm truly right on this scenario. But when you appreciate the relationship, when you appreciate the marriage, you'll let it go. You'll relinquish it. You'll be like, yeah, you know what, you're right. People are afraid to do that. I think they're afraid to say, no, I'm sorry. This was I shouldn't have reacted. Even though deep down you probably still really feel it that it wasn't your fault. Sometimes it's okay, but then what is not okay is when you see a pattern of one person doing the same and the same and the same again. But you have to put yourself out there to start it off to say, look, I'm here, I'm trying, you're here, you're trying. Let's just, move on. And you have to see the other person reciprocate as well. It doesn't just go one way.
See, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because that's the balance we're constantly looking for. Like, marriage is not a fantasy. And if you truly believe that you are going to win an argument in your marriage, you've already started out as wrong. Because even if you are right, the way you deliver, the way you receive, the way you respond to being right. And sometimes you will have to let go of something that you are like, no, I believe this is true for the sake of your marriage. And people are not willing to be flexible anymore. They take that as a personal attack.
Yeah.
Like, so if I am 110% sure I'm right about something, I, as a wife, will have to be able to manage and decipher between, and this is each individual case. You can't blanket your marriage. Like, I'm always going to react like this. That doesn't make sense.
Mm,
You have to assess each situation for when it shows up, whether the battle is worth fighting or not. And if you genuinely believe, like, oh, if I say that I'm wrong and admit I'm wrong, this person's going to take advantage of me, then that's probably a big signal for you in the first place about whether this is a good situation for you to be in.
hmm.
Because you shouldn't feel attacked, or you shouldn't feel like you want to attack your partner. It
Yeah,
should always be a conversation. Yes, there'll be frustrations, but in some cases, if you can look at your partner and, like we said about perspective and seeing what your marriage is, if from an Islamic point of view, you will see that actually it's not this just this earth's journey. It's Jannah that you're both trying to achieve here.
yeah,
It's not personal liberation and satisfaction that I was right for 5 minutes on earth.
yeah. And to get to that love that we were speaking about, it's a case of to get to that connection, to get to that contentness with your partner, you have to go through this. You have to go through tricky situations. It doesn't just, I honestly think, see when people say, oh, but I love them pre-marriage, right? I always think, but it's not like you said, it's lust, right? It's not love because love is when the other person has to sacrifice something for you. So the other person has to go without, the other person has to put themselves out, the other person has to put you forward in times when you really didn't want to. That is what grows love because you had to take a little bit away from what you wanted. You're not putting yourself forward anymore. You've had to put your spouse forward, men and women, both ways. And this is equal, I think, where you do have to put yourself out for the other person. And that's when you both grow, that's when you both truly form love. Like when Alanakari, if someone's sick, right? But the other person perseveres. They're like, no, look, let me pick this up. Let me look after you. Let me ensure that you're taken care of. They put themselves out. They might not want to do that. Nobody wants to do that, but they do it because it's for their spouse and it's for, like you said, it's for their Jannah. Then that's what grows love. That after that
Mm.
moment has passed, there will be a bond that will have formed that they couldn't have even known about previously. It just happens. And when they're at that stage, and it's a scary moment because as you've said, you shouldn't just want someone and you shouldn't just feel like this person will make me happy because pre-marriage you should already have self-contentment because that spouse will not bring you contentment. It just won't. You have to be happy within yourself, have a relationship with God because otherwise, you'll be looking for other ways in life to fulfill what we're built for, what we're made for, which is to worship and to truly attach yourself to. So you can't fully attach yourself to your spouse, but then you begin to get into a fear. I've seen it with people when they're like, I've formed this bond with my spouse, and they then don't want to they then feel that they've gotten to a stage because of all the hardship. These are not people who have gone through easy lives. They're people who have gone through major hardships, and they're often people who are a little bit older than myself. And they say, well, we've gotten to this point, we're so content, but now we have to realize that there's a day we're going to go. And that day we're going to go, we can't attach too much. So then they start to detach slightly. It's been
Mm.
a very interesting conversation. And that's the thing is you can reach such amazing heights with your partner, but you have to go through the hardships, but it has to be give and take.
Yeah. And I think it's a really important lesson in what you just said that whoever is, not quite, you know, pursued this journey yet, or you're at the beginning of it, the creation of that, the building of that love, that respect, that feeling of duty, that give and take, the sacrifice leading to more depths of love, all of that stuff takes time. You are not going to get that in the dating phase. It doesn't exist there because it's all in hindsight. You could have a massive surgical procedure, everyone's running around, in that moment, you're not well and you can't quite take it in. And then 6 months later, you've recovered from everything, you're feeling better, you're walking and you're getting on with it. And that's when it all comes back to you that, wow, you really took care of me. You moved all the schedules around and you did this and you did that and you bought me food. And all of these realizations come to human beings later. Whereas
Yeah.
what I've noticed is with a lot of I predominantly coach women only because I don't assume to know the male psyche beyond a certain extent.
Yeah.
But they're like, they'll go up to him in the first couple of weeks after our couple session and be like, look, I've changed. I'm doing this for you now, and I'm doing this for you now. Have you noticed it? Have you noticed it? Have you noticed it? And they so badly want that appreciation and
Appreciation.
that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Like, look at this effort I'm putting in. And when you decide to get married, you
And I
have
think
to.
that's sweet as well. I think it's nice they do that because sometimes it's nice to say, oh, can you see I've been trying, because sometimes it goes unacknowledged and that's unfair as well. So it's nice that they're trying and they're trying to say, have you saw I'm trying, It's nice.
It is sweet,
Mm-hmm.
and I do appreciate that. But one thing I do say to my girls is please don't let go of your divine feminine. There is a balance to be had here. When you become a pick me and you're like, honey, look, I put an extra this and this
Oh
in your
yeah.
this and I did this and that is when
If
you
yeah,
start
if you go
morphing
running
yourself.
every time, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now you're creating a cat and mouse situation.
Yes,
And
for sure.
that is what you don't want to do. So and every human being has different personality as well. So it is a very layered thing. And that's why when people hear these conversations, I'm like, have enough discernment and understanding of your own life to what advice you're attaching from what you listen to. Not
Yeah.
everything is relevant for you. But what I'm trying to get at is marriage requires a level of patience that romance doesn't allow for. Romance isn't patient, lust isn't patient.
It will never keep
Romance
it
and love,
going. No.
yeah, it wants you to move at 1,000 miles an hour right here, right now, and give your everything.
This is how much the initial lust part doesn't mean anything. Like, for example, I say this to people all the time. Have you ever been so attracted to someone and then they open their mouth and say something and you think, oh my gosh, not anymore. What was I thinking? But that's how quick it changes. That's how quick and it can change just as quick the other way. Someone that you didn't think was for you can just it can just go. It can just all of a sudden you think, yeah, you're my person. And to anyone listening, to anyone thinking right now, how can I attain that level of marriage that we're talking about? How can I attain it? Is honestly be open-minded and allow the people that I put into your life, allow you to just get to know them and see. Don't close. That's the first step. Don't close yourself off, because you're stopping yourself from being able to understand if there's something more real. The grass is not always greener. That's the thing. Just because if you have someone sitting in front of you, don't th that doesn't mean you, and there's people commonly use words settle. That doesn't mean you settle for someone just because they're there in front of you, but it also means appreciate who you have in front of you, who is speaking to you, who's giving you the time and energy, who's following through with what they've said they would. They call you when they say they would, they meet your family when they say they would. These are gold mine attributes. Like truly, these are so important that not to overlook. So don't always think, well, this is such a great situation, but I want to see what's over the hill. I think there's more guys in the app that I still need to talk to. It's like, don't do that to yourself. Give someone a chance and keep your mind open. And it's the fear is, oh, but I invest so much time and emotion. That is a struggle. You have to invest so much time and emotion. You have to build yourself back up again if it doesn't work out, if you truly did build some sort of bond. But that is just the reality of being able to try to find someone. That's what we have to go through. But you'll never regret anything. You'll never look back and say, oh, I wish I should have. I wish I could have. You'll just every opportunity you pursued till you knew it wasn't for you, and that's it, and you move on to the next person. And I think that's the first step
Mm.
to meeting a real spouse.
So let's just expand a little bit on what you said earlier, where people are afraid about their emotional investment.
Hmm.
Now, my opinion on this is that you, we all need to learn emotional regulation. You don't put your heart and your soul and everything on a plate for somebody else to stab a fork in it and munch it like a steak,
Yes.
right? So you need to use your mind. And I think that's where people think, well, it's just not romantic then, is it? If I'm having to use my mind. You you don't want that kind of nonsensical romance because that's lust
Yeah.
and that fire burns real strong. And even Islamically speaking, it is very much acknowledged to be I read this the other day. It said that basically the lust between a man and woman is probably the strongest nasha available on earth. It's so intoxicating that it feels so amazing that we will do anything to get that high.
Yeah.
That high
What
is
is, yeah.
dangerous. And
Yeah.
when you try to take that high from the start, so you're coming into a situation, you're putting all your fears on this person. When you said about being open-minded, people will be like, oh, his dad's got two wives, so he's gonna do that to
Yeah.
me. Right.
Yes.
Okay. You need to be have enough intelligence to be able to approach that conversation correctly. And that's what we're missing here. People don't have not only the self-esteem, the confidence, but the intellect to approach these difficult situations properly.
Yeah.
You don't go, well, your dad's got two wives, so you're going to end up doing that to me, aren't you?
Yeah.
Versus,
It's a small-minded way of viewing a situation that this Western society says is bad, you know? Um, because that's the thing, remember, like we don't originate from here. This is not where our values come from, So I
mm,
think that it is very mixed. And I get it, like, because me being young, once you do think, oh, can I handle that situation? What do I do? And it's a case of, like you said, building the ability to be able to communicate. And even if it's not that situation for you, communicate that in a way where the other person can also defend that. They can also say, well, this is how we can work around it. This is how we can, allow for a space for you to make it easier. Something like that. It comes definitely from both ways. But what you were saying about, having the intellect in the conversation, it's like the burnout that people feel and they invest so much emotion is because, like, I will come across people who, if they're divorced, they will talk about their divorce in the first interaction with that person. Now,
oh gosh, no.
I think you're literally just that person is a stranger, and it's nothing about that they have to know. No, they don't have to know anything. They're taking
Mm,
you for face value right now, as you are for them. Of course, there's a time when you might want to go into it, but that's way later. But if you're a woman and or a man and you're meeting people and you find burnout, and because you're talking a lot about your past very early on, this is why you're burning out. Because to open up those doors, to relive those memories constantly, of course, is exhausting. How can you maintain
yes.
that level of emotion? You just can't.
And you're laying yourself bare
Yeah.
in the wrong environment prematurely. And this is where I said about the Western values and Islamic values. So we are saturated on social media with, they have to accept every single little piece of you. And if they don't, they're not worth it and they're not the one. And, so I think what we do is we lay it all bare because we're like, if you can't handle this, tell me now because I don't have the emotional capacity or the strength to take rejection.
Yeah.
We need to start getting used to taking rejection and appropriately and respectfully rejecting others. There's a reason why this form of communication exists and it
Yes.
can be done politely. You mentioned earlier about, red flags. A situation comes to mind where a lady was approached by someone. It was all very neat and tidy and clean. And then within the first conversation, he made it clear. I do have a first wife. She unfortunately became very ill. She had an issue with her spine. And as time went along, she can't physically move anymore. So they had a conversation where she said, look, we're still very young and I'm bedridden. So go ahead and look for a partner because we've got years ahead of us yet. And I want you to live a fulfilled life. So he was very open about that and very honest. And I think those are the moments where it tests your ability to communicate with someone above a certain level. Because if that comes in your mind and you go, oh my God, second wife, no, I can't do it, all your fears are now clouding your judgment. You're not even able to ask the appropriate questions because your fears are becoming the forefront of your mindset. You
Yeah.
actually asking the questions within that, understanding yourself enough to know what are my fears surrounding this? Is it jealousy? Is it the children? Is it the time management?
Is it what people think?
Is it what people think? That's a big one because you are now not able to investigate deeper because your fears and your emotional regulation are just totally out of control.
Yeah.
Um, there are so many people out there that are not in the most traditional of situations, but could probably make the best spouse.
Yes. Yes.
So being able to just ask those questions like, okay, how many children do you have? What kind of time management would you be thinking of getting into?
Mhm.
Would you be able to move? Can you not move? Ask these questions because, okay, say this person, you're really not interested in them. Fair enough. But it's good practice for you to be able to have that adult to adult interaction.
100%. And also reevaluate your thinking. That doesn't mean you have to go through with it. This is the thing, is there's no forcing. There's no you must do this, you must do that, but open up your mind. Have an internal conversation with yourself to be like, how do I feel about this? Like you just said, and maybe look at it from a different perspective of his wife got so sick and he's not left her. Then what does that mean for me? Regardless of my life circumstances, he will stick by me. Is that not
Yes.
something to be said? And even if your answer is still no, fine, but appreciate that life interaction and appreciate the man coming to you telling you, look, this is my situation, and you can approach it differently next time. You can approach a different situation with someone differently for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we can know, we all know deeply what we're willing to put up with and what we're not.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't take, I think what our fear generally is based, especially when it comes to women, is if I emotionally invest, because once we emotionally invest, we fall from a great height. We crash and burn. And I think that's why it's so important, this premarital element. You need to know yourself so deeply, but at the same time, respect that somebody else feels that they know themselves as deeply as you know you.
Yeah.
We're so arrogant now. There's such a narcissistic approach in the world these days when it comes to marriage. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. Fair enough. There are a list of things that we all have that like literally not their deal breakers. I can't
Mm.
move forward without it. But if you don't have the ability to open your mind, like you said, and accept the range of scenarios that are out there. We want black and white because we're so scared of a slight slip in the wrong direction. So what we're trying to do essentially is we're trying to meet someone and write all of our life together out with them from the
Yeah.
day we meet them.
Yeah. It's a lot of pressure. It's so much. And what you were saying about rejection, it stems from this point of reevaluating and opening your mind because it's not rejection, it's redirection. So when you
Mm,
look at it as this person's not rejected me specifically, how can they? They don't know you. They don't know anything of substance about you. So when it's rejection, it's literally just putting you into a new direction, but it's how you choose to go about that. It's how you choose to live your life after that. And like what just goes to my mind, maybe I just think of it differently, but that interaction with someone meeting that man whose wife was sick. I think Allah Ta'ala puts people into our life even for 5 minutes for a reason. It could have been that positive interaction with a woman saying to him, you know what? I don't see myself being in this environment, but I think what you're doing is amazing. And I think sticking by your wife is such a big blessing. And may Allah Ta'ala help you and find a spouse when something along those lines. Or having a nasty interaction can really go a long way to his journey, of how he progresses with someone, how he can meet someone new. Everyone you meet, you affect their journey, not just your own. So if someone's not for you, always be respectful, always be kind. And if that situation is not for you, then it's okay. But I think
Yeah.
that's this in my environment, when I introduce couples and my team introduces couples, I always say that this is a very kind environment. You don't treat anyone disrespectfully. If someone says something you don't like, think about it. You can come back to me, we can have a chat about it, but you don't react based on emotion because it's unfair. It's unfair to put someone in that situation. And to be fair, even when I think people feel like they don't have the time, but when you're having conversations with someone, it's nice to just be nice. You could know from the moment sitting down they're not for you, and that's fine. But be nice, be kind, and allow them to go about their life when inshallah they'll meet the right person for them. But just because they're not for you, that doesn't mean you have to have a nasty interaction for men and women both ways, and that's what also causes all of these issues is because it's a quick thing. It's like, no, not you, next. No, not you, next. And people have forgotten the etiquette of actually meeting someone, of being able to have
Mm,
just a nice interaction and appreciate you, not for me, but best of luck to you. We're almost at the end of the day. We're all here for the same journey. Let's keep going. And it becomes a more pleasant experience. It becomes and that settles your heart, it settles your mind. It's not I'm rushing out to meet someone and like you said, full of anxieties, full of fears, full of, projection. I'm about to do all this. It's a case of let's just see what we see. Let's see who we meet and we take it from there.
yeah. I think that does come from a place of self. It comes from a place where you've worked on your self-esteem because not every interaction and the response from that person, your whole sense of well-being doesn't live there according to someone's reaction. And when it does, and you want to be picked and you want to be loved and all that sort of emotional stuff is taking over your logical mind, that is when the interactions can start to go sour.
Mm,
Because now you are reacting on this person's response to whatever question or whatever it may be from a place of personal attack.
yeah.
And that's what we need to be careful of. When you first meet someone, it's not a personal attack. And even if they are trying to personally attack you should know yourself so firmly that it doesn't feel like it's something you need to blow up over or get angry. And I think that takes time for people to get to. We've got a lot of emotionally reactive young people out here wanting a spouse, trauma dumping on each other,
Mm,
and we're basically like almost like these children that are looking for a parent to accept us rather than a spouse to build a foundation and get to the akhirah with.
yeah.
We want people to mollycoddle us. And yes, there should be comfort and security and all that stuff in a marriage, but that stuff takes time. You don't just get that from the original, the dating part.
Yeah, and I think it comes with just lack of information on both ends. If it's a guy, he's not had the right guidance from his family to say this is how you should be in a marriage. And for a woman, she's not had the right guidance to say, look, this is what I m meant right from the beginning. We don't have guidance enough. We don't have a template. And you know what? I don't blame the older generation because they just did what they thought was best. And we're doing now what we think is best. But this is the time where we have more information available to us. Our own origin, our own cultures, everyone is becoming more and more educated. There's no excuse not to know. There's no excuse to fix these bad situations. So yeah, I don't hold regret or judge or hold bad feelings towards the older generation because I just can't. They went through so much trauma, we never will. So it's a case of understanding, right, what can we do differently and do it. But I think there's no excuse anymore. I think it's up to the individual to teach themselves and learn and understand what is the right way to go about it. There's no excuse. If you can learn, you can do a master's, you can do a PhD, you can do extra courses for your work, and you can do anything you want in life, but you can't focus on your self-development and you can't focus on how you portray yourself and how you're coming across. I think, and there's lots of avenues and ways to seek this information. So I think this is up to people now to make that change for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm a big supporter of that. I don't deliver it as gently and as kindly as you do. I'm far more forthright and aggressive when it comes to this because I feel like so many people are living in a state of pain and their trauma is constantly coming at them. And staying the victim and not regulating and going into themselves to understand themselves. Like you said, information is at your fingertips now,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the Muslim women scene, which is why I'm doing this podcast. I want Muslim women to be out. See, look, there is resources. People are doing things. I
Mm.
get messages all the, even during some of my coaching calls. Well, I don't know where to find that out from. I said, if I said to you, go and find a place to ombre your eyebrows because it will improve your look, within 5 minutes, you'll give me 10 salons.
It's very, very true.
Oh, sis, go here, do this. But when I say to you, you need to research your Islamic rights, but also your Islamic duties.
Mm.
Stop looking at what you should be receiving all the time. You should be reading both parts of it. What I need to do and what people need to be and how they need to be towards me.
Mm.
Look, you're so right. There is no excuse nowadays. Information is on our fingertips. You can literally Google anything now. There are hundreds and hundreds of female Muslim therapists, male therapists.
Yeah. But I also think social media is the big part of where people receive their information, and people are
Mm.
receiving the wrong information. I'm on
Yeah.
these apps, and the things I see, I just think, wow, this is so misled. This is a shame for that individual because they truly believe this. And they're also, like you said, projecting what they feel onto other people. And there are people who are just waiting to soak up information that's the first thing they see and they think, yeah, I think that too. And it's a
Yeah.
shame. And it builds a community of toxicity. It builds that community. And this is where it comes, this is where it's coming from. It's not, in a way, we're trying to solve the problem, but the problem is growing more heads. The more you cut it off, the more it's growing more heads because the
Yeah.
more bad experiences people go through, the more they share it, the more that's what people believe is reality. I know bad experiences can be reality, but like you said, seek seek self-development, not completely have to seek validation all the time. Because if you're seeking validation
Mm.
constantly, you're not going to find it. You know,
Yes.
you have to be able to validate your own feelings and emotions in life, always. And that comes from strength and that comes from Deen, become closer to Allah Ta'ala because I think people, like I said before, just trying to fill a gap, and that gap can only be filled by one thing. And then your partner will come. Your partner comes from your self-contentment. Allah Ta'ala will just bring them your way. But if you're seeking a partner to solve all your emotional, mental, and, problems of everything, then that's just the wrong way to go about it, and you'll never be satisfied.
Yeah, that's right. Because I think there's a confusion in the community. Like a man should be able to carry me and do this and do that. Yes, he should be able to, but there's a time and place for everything.
Yeah.
And the things develop and become deeper over that time. But that self acknowledgement, this is what I really want to focus on what you said. Stop looking for approval from people and look for approval from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the
Mm.
more you do that investigation, the calmer you'll naturally become in your demeanor. You won't have to try so hard because you know exactly what you're meant to be doing and why the world runs the way it runs. But if you don't explore the deen and don't explore where your faith is and where it's at, you're always going to be lost because you're going to attach yourself to every third party's opinion. That's a huge factor. I do agree with you on that, because you've got young men who are nowhere near the same age group or the financial status as Andrew Tate, and
Mm.
they'll watch his videos and they will perceive that information from the mindset and the experience that they have. and it will start projecting out their version of reality.
Yes. They'll think
And
that's how life is, and that's how they need to be and how they need to think.
yeah,
And that's why it's so important for people with platforms to be very careful with what they're sharing, you know. Yeah, people like that, obviously they're going to share what they want to share. It's all about views and money and everything at the end of the day. But people that have the inshallah that good conscience to be aware before you share something, think, is this something that I should be sharing? You know, is this something that's either just personal to me and I'm perceiving it like this? But make sure you know it's an actual real situation. And I also think share it,
mm,
but share a solution. You know, don't just share it and then rile people up and then people become more, full of anxiety. It's like, okay, I'm sharing an issue, but here's a solution. Here's what you can do to tackle this if you ever do come across it. You know, it becomes much more informative and people can walk away and reevaluate. But
yeah. I think social media can be a very dangerous place for people that haven't got their mental and emotional faculties in order. And I also think, and it's happened to me plenty of times, where somebody has just taken a 20, 30-second clip out of a whole 10 minutes of something I've said and taken it completely out of context and then just blown it up and gone into another realm. And
yeah.
that's another thing we're dealing with in the marriage scene as well, because people will go on someone's social media and try to assess and judge them from that point of view. People are not who they are on social media. That is not the person you'll be dealing with in everyday life. That's a persona, there's an agenda behind it, there's a motivation behind why that content is being shared. Does it give you an indication of some parts of their personality? Yeah, sure.
Mm.
But you can't judge someone totally off their social media. You
Yeah.
know, we've got to be careful how we judge people and the information we take from them.
100%. I think there's an inclination for people to be nasty online, which we all know about. Like you'll meet that person in real life and they will never say anything, but online they have this anonymity and they have this ability to feel free to say this is my opportunity now to just let rip and say what I want. And it's very strange. And those people are the ones that really need to do the self-reflecting and reevaluating and understand what they're going through, because it just affects everyone else's experience. Like you said, someone purposefully choosing a moment that your words can be taken out of context. It's a lot of time and energy and a lot of effort. And it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
who has the time, to do
Yeah.
this? I certainly don't have the time to take someone else's clip and adjust it, So I think that's what they're choosing to spend their time on. And that's the shame. That's the sad part is if you
Yeah.
spent your time wisely, you probably would be more further forward in life.
Well, we keep coming back to self-regulation. And
Yeah.
when you have that self-regulation, when you have that self-policing element, nobody's perfect. We all sin. We need to get this thing out of our mind that somewhere there's this perfect angel person of a human being that doesn't ever get anything wrong or say a word out of place.
Yeah.
We all do it. And
Yeah.
we tend to judge people very quickly when they say a word out of place as well, rather than giving them the grace that we would also expect to receive.
100%, especially in environments like you and I are in today, we're both just speaking out loud. We're thinking out loud of what we're based on just reacting to what each other is saying. This is not a thought out conversation where I had planned or you had planned what you're going to say. It's just a case of let's say what comes to mind. And yeah, sometimes it might not have come out how we intended, but you give people the leeway and understanding. And this is the same issue when it comes to meeting a partner, is you're not giving enough of the benefit of doubt. You're taking everything and you're magnifying it and you're making it bigger than it is. And when you could just reevaluate it, think about it and say, well, how could I have taken this? Like I say that all the time. Like do people do jump to conclusions? Like with couples, um, for example, my clients are amazing generally, but of course there are people who they worry and they tend to overthink, and that's just part of human. That's just part of being a human. It happens. But the thing I like to do is that I get to talk through it with them and I get to speak to them and I get to say, well, let's talk about it, let's review it, and hopefully we can come to a better conclusion at the end of the call. So for example, one of my clients, he's a pilot, and when I was introducing to him to a woman, she was based in London and she couldn't leave London. This is where her job was, her family was. And I introduced her. And when they were starting to speak, so for background information, she didn't know much about him at this point in terms of the background. But so he, as the youngest son, he has two other brothers, both are with his parents. So because he's the youngest, his family just said, you go off, do what you want to do, you can come home whenever you want in terms of like come to stay. And if you want to progress your career in being a pilot, and you do that. So he didn't have any major worries, no major commitments. So he's off, jetting from country to country all the time, never really in one place for long. But when I introduced her to him, I explained a little bit about his situation. So I said, look, don't worry. But in the back of her mind, her conversations were very much based around, but when do you come home? Do you come home often? So what do you do like when you're not at home then? What do you do in all these countries? So it was very, she was trying to find how to think about it. But what he was taking that was he felt that she was very dismissive of his life without knowing that when he found someone, when he was settled, he would come back to the UK and he would build a life here. But at the moment, he's single, he doesn't have any commitment, so there's no need for him to be. But when they finished the conversation, I got both of their feedback a few days later and I spoke to them, and she had no idea that this is how she was coming across. She had no idea. She goes, oh, I was just trying to understand, but she didn't realize the way she was coming across was very accusatory. It was very, why aren't you at home? Because that's probably a fear she has in the background is, but are you ever going to come back? So it's a case of we jumped too far ahead and we're not just looking at today and reevaluating today. And we've possibly missed out on a good situation because we've skipped ahead again. We've just gone way too far into the
Yes.
future than trying to just take today for what it is, a conversation, and make a decision later. So I think it's just very
Mm.
common to be in our heads a lot and to be a bit detached from what is and what we think it is.
I think a lot of women are afraid to be detached because they think that level of detachment will stop them from falling in love.
Mm,
They're like, oh, I need to be totally 100%, neck deep invested in this from the first conversation. Otherwise, how will it develop? How will
yeah,
it turn into romance? But actually, being balanced at the start, because I think what we forget is this other person is also assessing us. We're not only doing the assessing, it's not a one-way street.
yeah,
Like, I'm going to check whether he's perfect for me and then we'll take it from there. No, he's also doing that assessment.
yeah,
And, people don't realize, especially women, when we have fears and concerns, it comes out in our tone.
yeah.
And now you're already naggy.
Yes, yeah.
You're already the nag.
Yeah, it's a shame. And that's what I like about like what I do is I get to have the opportunity to speak to both people about how the meeting went from each other's perspective individually. So that's what's taught me so much. That's how I've learned what people think. That's how I've learned how people react to certain conversations and what are the best way to improve on that. So that's where it all comes from, initially when we started this conversation, when people just don't know how to be, they don't know how to have these conversations that could, inshallah, increase their chances of success much, much quicker. But they learn, well, or they don't learn because they never receive feedback. And I think that's another thing in our communities. We don't receive closure. When you've spoken to
Mm,
someone and it doesn't work out, you don't get that closure as to what happened and why. And then unresolved relationships like that can go a long way to affecting you as a person. And then even when you do meet the right person, all the unresolved situations in your head will seep into that as well. Um,
mm.
so I think it's nice to encourage people to say, hey, look, it was nice meeting you, but this is the reason why I don't want to continue, rather than just point blank ignoring them or blocking them and not
Yeah, I
allowing them
think
the
that's quite
opportunity.
polite. That level of social etiquette, it should definitely be prioritized. But I think it's a double-edged thing. So we need to work on our own self-esteem. So we are not expecting closure, but we
Yeah.
should also have enough dignity and respect for ourselves and others to provide it when needed.
Agreed.
We go from one extreme to another, don't we? But like, well, I'm not talking to them, I forget it, block, delete. But there's a balance in everything, especially when it comes to our deen.
Mm.
We don't go from one extreme to another. Being polite, considerate of other human beings, whilst maintaining your own self-respect and dignity, is the foundational principles of being a Muslim.
We talk about dignity though and integrity, but everything that's created now for Muslims, well, most things that's created for Muslims to me is built upon numbers, like fast paced. So it's like, not you next person, not you next person, 50 conversations going on at once. There's no individuality, there's no spending your time to get to know one person. With me, I always say it's quality over quantity. I don't like to match people by numbers in the sense of the more people you meet, the more successful you are. I don't believe that. I think it's genuinely the quality of the people you surround yourself in. But how the environment now is created with people is they look at the numbers, they think, no, the more people I get through, the better chance of success I'll have. And that creates this lack of integrity and the lack of being able to communicate or, and the thing is, yeah, totally, you should have that ability to be able to have that self acknowledgement that okay, I don't need it. But when it's for a woman, when it's your maybe like 50th conversation where that person hasn't told you why, like a lot of people come to me, men as well, and they'll say, I've met a lot of people, but I just don't know why it's not progressing. Like they have no context as to what they're doing wrong, or is it because of the people they're meeting? Is it because of the avenue they're choosing? You know, um,
Mm,
there's just a lack of awareness on how to actually go about meeting people.
yeah. I think if we were just a lot more kinder to the fact that, because we see it from the first person's perspective, I'm going in and I'm feeling nervous and I want to know all these things. When actually, if we were just to put it into the perspective of this person is also putting themselves in an equally as uncomfortable situation as I am,
Yeah.
like we're both feeling nervous. Sometimes even in initial conversations, your voice doesn't even sound the same as it normally does because you're so
Yeah.
pent up. Like all of a sudden you're talking to the guy like this, you're like, oh hey, you're like, why am I talking like that? Like what's going on? So we should definitely give each other grace in the initial conversations because that tension, it's not fair. It's not fair on either party. So if we could work on our emotional regulation, have build our self-esteem upon the instructions given us to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is a lifelong journey, as you know, sis. We could be working on this and learning deen until the day we drop and still only have 2% of the knowledge in our hands, if that. But
Mm.
it's the persistence of that and having your deen in your control. You know, you mentioned earlier about the praying. Yes, it says a lot about a person, but it only says a lot in a limited frame.
Mm.
Plenty of people pray, but they have their intention, the way they speak, the way they approach people in life. You're like, oh, I don't like that. So we hear what something good is on the list, and we're
Yeah.
like, yeah, but he prays. Yeah, I know that, but there's more, you need more time. And this is what I wanted to talk to you about earlier. Do you believe that there is a contradiction between Islamically, they say don't wait around too long and get married, versus taking your time to know this person? I feel like there's a contradiction in these ideologies.
I feel like there's a sweet spot. Like, for example, men and women, again, I'm going to say it to them both because it does apply. You know, I really encourage women to gain knowledge, to, if they want to build a career, to do so, to go to university, whatever they want to do. But don't put your search off. Don't say, when I'm this age, I'm going to start looking, because most people find that when you're that age and you start looking, it doesn't take 3 months, it takes time. And that's what you're saying now. Allow for the time to get to know someone and build that cultural, in terms of social awareness of what situation am I looking at here to get married. And I think what people don't do enough when it comes to the time frame of getting to know someone, is why do people only introduce families when it's very serious? Like when it's like
Oh,
literally, like, okay, I am obsessed with you. I need to marry you tomorrow. Tomorrow meet my mom. It's like, why?
yeah, 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 yeah.
So you're waiting till the worst time to do that when emotions are so heightened. Your parents have heard you talk about them forever and they're built up, and it's like, why not meet someone, get to know them for a few months and say, hey, look, we're getting along well.
Yeah,
Let's introduce family because then we know that they get on and we can get to know each other more comfortably now. They're both aware of who each other's families are and we can just see how it goes, but we don't have this in the back of our minds. And you also cancel out, is that person serious? Because if they're not going to do that, they're not serious. You're also going to establish any sort of fears that you're building up in your mind about who his family is or who her family is, you'll know because you'll have met them. You'll have understood. You'll be able to address these situations instead of it being built up for so long. And it just levels the field out a little bit. So you both know, let's get to know each other. And then saves your it saves your emotions because if it doesn't work out in that, your family's maybe tendency to be a bit picky, which is fine. If they are, then you've said goodbye to them sooner than later. You haven't gone down 6 to 9 months and then you've realized, okay, that person was for me. And then you build up resentment towards your family. It's like everyone's doing this all wrong. It's like protect
yeah,
yourself, protect your family, and just meet people sooner. So it's like don't talk on the phone for months, even if you meet online. Meet through exchange numbers to meet in person. Don't exchange numbers just to chat. Come on. Like I don't know why people do that. Don't speak for months and months. Exchange numbers to meet. If you exchange numbers and you can see their intention is not to meet, let it go. Doesn't matter how good looking they are. Let it go because their intention is to not meet you. Like that's the point.
yes,
Their intention is to fill their time with someone and to get that, feeling of I'm speaking to someone of the opposite gender and it's nice, no. Um, it happens to a lot of people. So people have to protect themselves. You have to
yeah,
actively be strong enough to say, well, if this person, and I get it, like if they say, oh, look, I'd rather, because everyone's different. If they say, look, I'd rather not introduce my parents this month, but next month, right? Say they say that, it's like, okay, fine, go ahead with it. But if next month doesn't come and they don't do it, sorry, if next month comes and they don't do it, then you should say goodbye because that's how people get caught up in, oh no, I will marry you. I will marry you. It's
yeah,
just when it's a bad time. It's like, well, why are you talking to me then? You know?
yeah. Why are you talking to anyone if it's a bad time? And I think you're right about the introduction element of it. And I say this from um, my own experience as well. When you get too invested beforehand, you're not involving your family at this point, you're telling them.
Mm,
That's never going to go down well anyway. Now, like you said, you're in a battle with your emotions. You want to be with him. All of a sudden, you're in a Bollywood movie. नहीं मैंने इसके साथ ही शादी करनी है मैं मर जाऊंगी मैं इसके साथ शादी नहीं करूंगी तो मेरी जिंदगी बर्बाद हो जाएगी is because you've gone way too far in your emotional investment before you actually should have.
yeah.
I also want to tackle a couple of things that I know that it comes up, the questions come up. Well, I don't even respect my family's opinion, so why would I get them involved? Fair enough, you might not. But this isn't about your family's opinion 100%. This is about his reaction to you involving him in a more serious scenario. You need to see how he reacts to that. If man is delaying, pushing aside, oh, I don't know, oh, I'm not sure, and you continue that for months, now you're in a trauma bond.
Yeah. Representation is very undervalued. Representation is so important. Representation gives you power and protection because the other person knows this person has someone. They have people who have got their back. So you need to be aware of it. That's the point of a mihram, right? To protect you. Now, I get people are not comfortable always meeting around mihrams. Everyone's different. Some people do, some people don't. Whatever they like to do is their right. But at the end of the day, your family act as your mihram when you choose to introduce. So you have to be aware that if that person sees you, because the thing is, I'm not going to sit here and pretend everyone's jolly and great and everyone's got the best intentions. People have bad intentions.
Mm,
So if you let that person know, like my family will have involvement at some stage, then they're not going to want that, you know? So as soon as they see and they're going to know they're going to have to answer to someone else other than you at the same time, should anything go wrong, should they mistreat you. It's a very big thing, you know? So people might not realize, think I can handle this myself, but your family is important in that aspect to protect you, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to, this is where the whole emotional regulation and building your Islamic self-esteem comes in.
Mm,
Because when you read the seerah, when you read certain ayahs and you're able to connect the narratives together and you come up with the logic as to why there's a certain timeline and a certain way things have been decreed to be done for not 100% success, but a better likelihood, less damage on you and your soul as a person, and something you can learn and grow from rather than something that destroys you into a million pieces. You know,
yeah.
and those parameters have been made very clear to us. But I think holding on to Islam for women is so important if you want to make sure that you are mentally and emotionally and physically protected. Because we're so afraid as women of scaring guys off.
Mm,
At this age I'm at now, if somebody gets scared off because I've mentioned something, I will go into sujood to say shukr
mm,
alhamdulillah to my Rabb. Because when you are more clear on the direction and the angle you're going out to look for a spouse, and
mm,
people fall away from that when you're going by the parameters of Allah, it's a blessing.
mm.
If somebody's delaying you, if somebody's like sort of saying one thing one week and the next week is something else, that should be enough for you to know that this isn't doing going forward. And introducing the family, any man that is serious about you, and I know people have said this all over the internet, so people don't take it seriously anymore. But any man that is truly interested in you, especially if you've had the initial first few conversations,
Mm.
he will be nervous about meeting your parents, but he won't stop it from happening because he knows that's the path he needs to take
Yes.
to obtain you.
Yes, like with my clients, I just had a conversation yesterday where she was like, look, I want to involve a Mihram when I meet him in person. And in my situation, they meet over video chat first, and then I get them to meet in person, just so they know who they're meeting. And she said to me, like, when we meet in person, I do want to have someone there. She goes, do you think they will have an issue with that? I said, no. I said, every man that comes to me is serious about looking for a partner. I said, what I would advise is your Mehram comes, introduces themselves to him, you know, shakes his hand, says Salam alaikum, say, you know, I'm this relation, and then leave you be, let you speak because he also doesn't have representation. So to sit in that environment is not really fair because he doesn't have equal representation. But allow that person to come, allow your match to know you've brought someone, and then let them come back and get you because they know where you are. If they're sitting in the coffee shop next door, they've gone for a walk, they know you're in a public environment, they know you're safe, that's all fine. But a man who's serious about you will just be like, of course he's going to be nervous, but he's going to be like, this is what has to happen. This is the step I have to take if I'm serious about someone.
Yes, that's right. And the minute you get the excuses and the I don't know and a maybe later and all this and that, a man's uncertainty says a lot about him and a lot about how he feels about you.
Mm.
And we take that uncertainty as women and we tie ourselves up in knots and somehow make that the ultimate goal of success is getting rid of his doubts. He needs to be getting rid of your doubts.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
And women have to feel strong enough to voice that in the right way, you know, to say, look, this is how I'm feeling, and this is, you know,
yeah,
this is my expectations now moving forward. Like, set it, put it out there, and say, because there's a lot of women right now just caught up in speaking to someone, and they're so invested and they can't let go. And my heart just breaks because these women are so nice. They're just looking for a companion. They're worried that what if they don't get that connection with someone else? So they're stuck to this toxic person who's just leading them on. And they know it, but they still don't want to break away because any attention is better than none. And I find it really sad.
yeah, yeah, subhanAllah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think this is why I constantly talk about self-esteem and accountability. It is a regular narrative that comes up because I
Yeah.
don't think a lot of South Asian women have even been taught how to build their self-esteem.
You know where I think it stems from? I'm not here to judge anyone's family life, but it comes from the father and the brothers, the males of that family, on how they are with their women. How
Mm,
the man of the home is with his women is how they will be. You know, if he, I'm not saying that it solely comes from that, but that's where it starts off, because where else did they gain this information from as children? You know, they have to have self-esteem, they have to have self-awareness from a young age to protect themselves. And if they
yeah.
don't, they go seeking it. And that is it's a topic no one really speaks about that I've come across. But if they're not being instilled in them and not that safety net of knowing you have a male figure in your life from that young age to protect you, and you have that validation in the sense of, okay, I've now been taught who I am, and I'm now aware of how much power I hold within myself and who I give my time to, then women will give it to the next person that comes along. And
Or
it's
just anyone. Yeah, it's true. And I think we mention about fathers. I do talk about this on my page quite a bit as well, and it regularly comes up in the coaching sessions. How our parents were with one another and how they treated us when we were younger plays a huge factor on the lenses and the glasses, the tinted glasses you're wearing when you go out and look for a partner.
yeah.
If all you've seen is emotional neglect, when you receive emotional neglect, your subconscious mind is like, this is normal. You don't think it's normal in your head with words.
Mm,
Your subconscious mind, your subconscious physical body, it has a memory, and we don't have knowledge around that in our community.
mm,
We're very basics level still when it comes to emotional intelligence. We haven't explored it and we don't understand it. And we truly believed if the mother's cooking dinner and the father's going to work every day, what more do you want? That was a perfect nuclear family.
yeah, yeah.
And that when I talk about these kind of things, it hurts me deeply because I've experienced that myself and I see it in other women and the desperation and the puppy dog eyes that they are entering every situation in. And when you've left your children vulnerable like this because of the lack of emotional intelligence that they needed to have to see from you to build their self-esteem, they are out there begging for love. And you fall into the hands of predators when you are thirsty.
Yeah.
And this cycle, the way I see it unfolding in front of me, even with people that are perceived to be the most confident and the most with it, deep inside, they don't believe that love and respect is a real thing.
Mm,
And that's why that spark becomes so important because that big dopamine hit, that huge chemical reaction makes them
latch
feel that
onto it.
love exists. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a drug. When your parents don't give it to you in the right doses, you grow up and you want to binge.
Yeah. It's so sad, isn't it? It's really
Yeah.
sad. And how can people grow up and they sometimes don't realize that this is what's happened in their families, or they do realize and they resent it. But I think there's a fine line between forgiveness and appreciation of, you thought you were probably doing best by me by maybe withdrawing emotion, and maybe they didn't know how to give it. Like when I think of my, much elder generation, they didn't know how to show love even to their own grandkids. They had, nice words and actions, but they don't know how to truly express, and it's because it was
Mm.
just never embedded in them. But this is for us to now change, and to just, I think that doesn't mean you go overboard and all you do is show your children love. You have to show them other things, where I think it's really important for parents to show children how to overcome hard situations. So them, if they, as a child, you see your parents who are having a disagreement, that doesn't mean a toxic argument. It means a disagreement, and how did they resolve it? That becomes part of the way you resolve issues as well. So I think it's really important for parents now to take note and implement this because it will only help their children,
It's
inshallah.
a really interesting cycle, isn't it? Because if the parents aren't to a certain extent regulated emotionally and know how to tackle these difficult situations, which we all know the South Asian community were not taught these basic things. We
Mm.
were taught how to have sabr, which is basically put up with everything. That's Pakistani sabr, not Islamic sabr.
Yeah.
Yeah, like put up with everything now the paper is signed. No matter how you're treated, no matter what happens to you must continue down this road to prove that you are a worthy member of society. Now, the children, as a result of that, are now emotionally thirsty children. Like, because it's an innate need for us to have our emotions not regulated by another, but at least acknowledged.
Yeah.
It's a primal human need.
Yeah.
And when we don't have that, the way we then scan the rest of the world for that, so now we're confused because we've thrown culture in there, we've thrown our emotional instabilities in there. We've got what we've seen from childhood, what's normal and not normal. And we need to remember one thing, that subconsciously what feels normal is very comfortable for the body,
Mm.
but it's very disrupting for the soul.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now you're in push-pull because you're like, this is what I know and this is normal and this is what love is. So I remember that's one of the first things I used to say to people when my marriage was on the rocks quite some years ago now. I was like, yeah, this is what marriage is. Marriage is misery. I used to say that with 10-10 confidence
Mm.
because that's all we heard. मर्द ऐसे ही होते हैं, ऐसे ही होता है, ऐसे ही करते हैं. Just stop making a big deal out of it. Put up and shut up, basically.
Yeah.
And that emotional thing, like we need to be more aware of it. Like you said, people aren't. They aren't aware that the lack of love between their parents has now affected what they want in life. Though these investigations need to happen before you put yourself out there in the world to try and get someone to attach themselves to you.
Mm.
Because you need to know yourself so deeply that you can describe what the other person is attaching themselves to when it comes to you.
Yeah.
What are they getting when it comes to you? And I would say that to people. What is a partner receiving from you? You write me a list and tell me what they're getting.
Mm.
Because usually it's the list of what people want because that childhood element was missing. Our inner child is screaming for that stability of love.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And sometimes it's what they need. So there's wants and needs that I always talk about, and your wants are things that you would like, and there's the needs that are things that you must like. Without that, your marriage wouldn't last. So I think people mix up the two and they say no. Like let's look at a superficial thing, which is height. People say no, it's a need. I have to have it. Like you don't have to have someone 6'2". It's not like a have to, even in your 5'2", you know.
Yeah.
5'8" and over is okay, and I don't get me wrong, when my clients come to me and they give me their criteria, I generally go by it. Unless I say to them, look, I think there's someone else you might like. What do you think outside of this criteria? But overall, if someone comes to me with unrealistic expectations and they say to me that I need this and I need this and I need this, I am very real and I tell people, unfortunately, I won't be able to help you. And that's not because I'm telling you what you want is wrong. What I'm telling you is I can't achieve it. And I'm very upfront about that because I don't like to give false hope in terms of what people think they will get from me because I don't make people in a factory. Do you know what I mean? I only have the people that I have, in life. And I always say as well, okay, sure, I have 6'2" people, right? But what if they're not good for you? What if I don't want you to meet them? But I've had people say, it's okay. I'd rather just meet them. And I say, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to do it. I don't feel comfortable doing that because if I know you're not what they want or you're not what they want, but because both your paper criteria just match and that's it, I'd rather not do it because I know you probably won't be satisfied with that conversation. So
Mm.
that's why it's scary sometimes coming to me because they relinquish control of being able to pick and choose who they meet because I pick for them. Though we speak often, I regulate and I understand, okay, cool, share with me how you feel, but they come to me because we make the decisions for them. They don't make that decision anymore. So they have a different perspective of when they meet people because it's like, okay, I actually don't know for the first time. Well, they know they have a bio and everything, but they don't know exactly who they're meeting. So,
Okay, so on that note,
mm.
will you just let people know where they can potentially contact you for your services?
Yeah, so I'm sure that you'll probably tag me on this so they'll be able to see my page. But my service is called Personal Match UK. So you can Google us, you can contact us through the website, and alhamdulillah, have an amazing, amazing team who will be able to chat to you. What they'll do is they'll basically just get to know you a little bit and share what we do and answer any questions that you have and ask if you'd be happy to continue on to the process just to learn more about what we do. And yeah, we work very closely with everyone that we speak to and do our best to help. So yeah, you can either contact my page directly or go through our website.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for today. We've covered a really wide spectrum of
Yeah,
things.
very.
Yeah, we've gone from self-regulation to the effect of parenting and how that affects us looking for a spouse, emotional regulation, male and female prospects and aspects on things. Like, this is a very deep topic, and I think the questions and the comments that arise from it could possibly we will redirect them your way, as you're the expert in this. And I really do appreciate your time and thank you so
Thank
much
you so
for
much
everything
for
you've given
inviting
us
me.
today.
No
Yeah,
problem.
my pleasure. I'm guys, I'm picking Muslims that I look at and I'm like, yeah, I'd be her friend, especially when we're doing something beneficial and to support the wider community, because we've got a lot of things, as we've mentioned here, that maybe some elements that need more work. So we can be a more successful ummah, inshallah ta'ala. So thank you so much for your time today, Nadia. It's
Thank
actually been a
you.
great conversation. I could easily just carry on having this
Yes, I
conversation.
know. All day.
Yeah. So inshallah, guys, if you want to get in touch for Nadia for her matchmaking services, just go back another 30 seconds and she's given all the information there. I will be tagging her on my TikTok page. Do you have YouTube as well?
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. So I'll tag your TikTok on the YouTube and then I'll tag it on the actual page of on my own TikTok page. Inshallah, if there's any more questions that come your way, are you okay with me sending them over?
Yes, of course. No problem at all.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And maybe we'll hit you up for a part two because we haven't
Inshallah.
even touched the tip of this iceberg yet.
Yes, lots more to talk about.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair, sis. Thank you so much. And inshallah, I will catch you soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye. Assalamu alaikum.